She stood by the lake smirking, as muddy water rushed toward my house. "Next time you'll pay your HOA dues on time," she said. I couldn't believe it. She'd actually ordered workers to dig a trench straight from the lake to my foundation. My $3 million home was turning into a swamp, and all because I said no to their illegal fees. But what she didn't know, I had everything on camera. The noise started early that morning, heavy machinery growling near the lake behind my house. At first, I thought the county was fixing drainage lines. But when I stepped outside, I saw men in yellow vests digging fast. Dirt flying everywhere, water slowly creeping closer to my backyard. I yelled, "Hey! Who authorized this?" One of them looked nervous and said, "HOA orders, sir. Mrs. Karen said it's a new water management project, Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. She'd been after me for months ever, since I refused to pay her so-called beautification fees. See, I already paid my dues on time every year, but she invented new charges out of nowhere. $500 for community lighting, $800 for lake maintenance. I asked for receipts. She responded with threats. That morning she arrived wearing her bright red blazer, clipboard in hand, and sunglasses that screamed fake authority. "You should have just paid, Michael," she said coldly. "Now the community has to protect itself from your negligence." "My negligence?" I laughed, disbelief choking my voice. "You're flooding my land," she smiled. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before ignoring an HOA directive." The trench kept getting deeper, connecting the lake directly to the slope behind my home. Mud and water started sliding down, pooling near my basement window. My security cameras were rolling. Every word she said, every action, recorded. When I called the sheriff's office, the dispatcher sighed. "Sir, if it's an HOA dispute, it's civil. We can't interfere." That's when I realized Karen knew exactly how to play this game. She'd made it look like maintenance work. As the first wave of water reached my patio, I ran to my basement and turned on the sump pumps. The noise outside grew louder. Karen shouting orders, men laughing like it was some kind of prank. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. I wasn't just going to sit and watch her destroy everything I'd built, because what Karen didn't know was that the property line didn't belong to her HOA at all, and by digging that trench, she'd just broken 3 state laws in one morning. I looked at the cameras, saved the footage, and whispered, "You just buried yourself." Karen, viral line for this section. She dug a trench to flood my house, but all she did was dig her own hole. By the next morning, the smell of wet soil and lake water filled the air. My backyard looked like a disaster zone. Mud everywhere, furniture floating, and the trench still open like an ugly scar across the property. The sound of frogs croaking mixed with the steady drip from my flooded basement ceiling. I didn't sleep all night. I just watched the footage again and again. Karen giving commands like a dictator, the workers following without hesitation. I sent the footage to my lawyer friend, Dan, who used to work for the state's environmental department. He called me within minutes. "Michael, do you realize what she's done?" His tone was sharp. "They dug into a protected waterway. That's not just HOA business, and that's a federal violation." That one sentence lit a fire inside me. I suddenly wasn't the helpless homeowner anymore. I was the guy with proof, the guy who could bring her entire fake empire down. But Karen wasn't done. Around noon, 2 HOA board members came to my door with smug smiles and an envelope. "This is your official notice," one of them said. "You've been fined $25,000 for damaging community property." "Damaging?" I said, trying not to laugh. "You flooded my property." They exchanged looks like I was the crazy one. "Mrs. Karen says your lack of drainage caused water to backflow into the lake. You're responsible." I stared at them for a long second. "You two might want to check your facts before standing beside her when this blows up." They left quickly. Maybe they sensed it. The tide was about to turn. I spent the next hours documenting every inch of damage, taking photos, measuring the trench's depth, and marking GPS coordinates. Dan helped me file an emergency complaint with the State Environmental Authority. He said once they reviewed it, the HOA would be under investigation. That night, while I was downloading backup footage from my cameras, headlights flashed across my window. I peeked through the blinds. A black SUV stopped in front of my driveway. Two men stepped out wearing uniforms with HOA enforcement badges. Yeah, HOA enforcement. I almost laughed again. They came up to my porch, one holding a clipboard, the other a phone recording. "Sir," the taller one said, "we're here to inform you that continued interference with community maintenance will result in legal action." I opened the door halfway. "Legal action?" I asked quietly. "From who, Karen?" "Because she's about 5 minutes away from being on the evening news." He frowned. "You can't record us without consent." I smiled. "I already did." His partner whispered something, and they walked away, muttering under their breath. But my blood was boiling. Karen had sent fake officers to intimidate me. Again. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I drove down to the county courthouse with all the evidence. Photos, videos, voice recordings, and Karen's fake HOA enforcement notices. The clerk at the counter raised her brows as she looked through the stack. "This is a lot," she said. "You're saying they diverted lake water onto your property?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied calmly. "And they impersonated law enforcement." She nodded slowly. "Environmental Crimes Division's gonna love this." Later that evening, I got a call from an investigator named Agent Rowe. His voice was steady, serious. "Mr. Grant, I've reviewed your evidence. If what you're saying checks out, this is bigger than an HOA dispute. They've violated multiple state codes. For the first time in days, I felt my chest loosen. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't going to surrender easily. She'd built her little empire on intimidation, and she wasn't used to losing. By the weekend, news spread around the neighborhood. Some residents stopped by quietly to tell me, "We never agreed to that trench, you know. She told us you approved it." Others whispered that Karen was holding emergency HOA meetings behind closed doors, panicking about possible legal retaliation. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. Sunday afternoon, as I was fixing my fence, Karen herself showed up. Her perfect hair was slightly out of place, a rare sight. She didn't shout this time. She spoke softly. "Michael, let's talk. We can resolve this without bringing the authorities in." I wiped my hands and faced her. "You mean without you getting arrested?" Her smile faltered. "You don't understand how these things work. The HOA protects this neighborhood. You're making a mistake going against it." I looked at her and said quietly, "The HOA doesn't own me, or this land." She laughed lightly. "You think you're untouchable? You're one complaint away from foreclosure." That's when I said something that made her face drop. "Funny you say that, Karen, because the county records I pulled yesterday show that your HOA's charter expired 2 years ago. You're not even legally recognized." Her smile froze. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She turned and walked away fast, her heels digging into the wet ground. And I just stood there watching her realize the empire she built was about to crumble because of one trench. But I wasn't finished, not yet. She dug a trench to flood me out, but she just drowned her own fake kingdom. Monday morning, everything in the neighborhood felt different. The air was heavy, the street unusually quiet. Usually Karen would be out walking her dog at sunrise, pretending to inspect people's lawns. But today, nothing. Her porch lights were off, her car gone. I sat on my porch sipping black coffee, half expecting her to show up with another threat. Instead, a silver sedan pulled into my driveway. A man in a gray suit stepped out, flashing a badge. "Mr. Grant?" he asked politely. "I'm Agent Rowe, State Environmental Division. We spoke on the phone." I led him to the backyard, and the moment he saw the trench, his calm expression hardened. "They connected this directly to the lake?" "Yeah," I said. "And they did it without a single permit." He crouched down, took a few samples of the soil and water, and shook his head. "This isn't a civil issue anymore. This is felony-level property damage. Whoever authorized this is in serious trouble." A slow satisfaction spread through my chest. "That'd be Karen, HOA president." Rowe gave a small smirk. "We'll see what she says under oath." Over the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet rumors. People who used to avoid me were suddenly friendly, waving, stopping by to check in. One neighbor, a soft-spoken teacher named Lisa, whispered, "Karen's been shredding papers in her garage all morning. She's scared. Good, she should be. But fear doesn't make people rational. It makes them dangerous." That evening, while I was reviewing camera footage on my phone, I noticed a flicker near the side of my house. Someone was there. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The beam caught a man crouching near my sump pump, one of the same guys who had dug the trench. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward him. He bolted, jumping into a white pickup and speeding off down the street. The next morning, my pump line was cut clean. My basement was flooding again. I sent the video to Agent Rowe. He called back instantly, his tone sharp now. "They're tampering with evidence. Leave everything as it is. We're sending a team today." By noon, 2 state vehicles rolled into the neighborhood. People peeked from behind curtains as agents in jackets marked Environmental Crimes Unit started taping off the trench area. Karen finally appeared, storming down her driveway, waving her phone. "You can't just walk onto HOA property," she yelled. Rowe turned to her calmly. "Ma'am, this isn't HOA property. It's part of a protected wetland. You dug into a state waterway." Her face went white. "No, that's community maintenance. We have rights." He handed her a paper. "You also have a court summons." The entire neighborhood froze. Some people gasped, others filmed from their lawns. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to argue, but Rowe wasn't listening anymore. He pointed at the trench. "You caused environmental damage, property destruction, and unauthorized land alteration. You'll need to come with us." They didn't cuff her, but the sight of her being escorted to her car was enough to silence everyone. For the first time in years, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA had no audience left to command. I thought it was over. I really did. But Karen's kind never give up that easily. 2 days later, I got a letter. Not from her, but from her lawyer. A lawsuit. She was suing me for defamation and emotional distress, claiming I'd ruined her reputation and falsified evidence. Dan laughed when he saw it. She's playing defense. Classic narcissist move. But something about it still bothered me. Karen had money, connections, and influence. If she managed to twist the narrative, she could drag me through court for years. That night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a video clip and shaky, recorded secretly. In it, Karen was sitting at a restaurant with one of the HOA enforcers, saying, "Make sure his cameras stop working before Monday." "I don't care how you do it." My heart pounded. Whoever sent that wanted me to win. I replied instantly, "Who are you?" No answer. Just one last text. She crossed everyone. It's time people saw who she really is. I forwarded the clip to Rowe. Within hours, he called me back, sounding more animated than ever. "This changes everything. That's proof of conspiracy and intent. We're adding new charges." The next morning, reporters showed up. Big cameras, microphones, vans. One of them shouted, "Mr. Grant, is it true the HOA president flooded your house intentionally?" I didn't want fame, I just wanted peace. But I realized this was bigger than me. So I said calmly, "She dug a trench to destroy my home. But the real damage was what she did to this community." That clip went viral. Within 24 hours, news outlets across the state ran the headline, "HOA president accused of flooding home in retaliation over fees." Karen's lawyer withdrew the lawsuit the same day. Her board resigned one by one. By the end of the week, she was officially removed from her position and charged with criminal property destruction and impersonation of authority. As I stood in my backyard that evening, the sunset reflecting off the drying soil, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The trench was still there, but now it was just a reminder of how fast power crumbles when truth finally surfaces. She tried to drown me in my own home, but the wave she sent came crashing back on her. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Pale lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of old paper filled the air. I sat quietly in the second row, watching as Karen walked in, flanked by her lawyers. She looked nothing like the woman who once strutted around our neighborhood giving orders. Her red blazer was gone, replaced by a dull gray suit. But her eyes, those sharp, arrogant eyes, still carried that same defiance. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of shuffling feet echoed through the room. As we sat, Karen's lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor, this case has been blown out of proportion. My client acted under her duty as HOA president to ensure the community's safety and compliance. The judge, an older man with silver glasses, frowned slightly. And flooding a homeowner's property qualifies as compliance? Karen's lawyer stammered. It was an unintended consequence. Roe, sitting beside me, whispered, "That's the weakest defense I've ever heard." Then it was our turn. My lawyer Dan stepped forward with calm precision. He played the video, the one showing Karen at the restaurant, ordering the fake enforcers to disable my cameras. The room fell silent. The audio crackled as her voice filled the courtroom. "I don't care how you do it. Just make sure his cameras stop working before Monday." Karen's face drained of color. The judge leaned back unimpressed. "That doesn't sound like community safety to me, Ms. Miller." Her lips trembled. "It's been taken out of context." Dan smiled faintly. "Then maybe this will help provide context." He pulled out another document, an official report from the State Financial Crimes Bureau. "Your Honor, while reviewing the HOA's bank statements, investigators discovered that over $120,000 of member fees were diverted into a private account under Ms. Miller's name." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Even the clerk paused mid-typing. Karen's lawyer whispered something urgently, but the judge raised a hand. "Quiet," Dan continued. "These so-called beautification fees weren't for community projects. They were funding her personal expenses, travel, jewelry, and, interestingly enough, payments to private contractors who performed unpermitted excavation around the lake." Karen's voice cracked. "That's a lie." Rose stood. "We have the receipts, ma'am." She turned toward me, eyes blazing. "You did this. You destroyed everything." I stared back calmly. "No, Karen, you did." The judge banged his gavel once. "Enough. This court will not tolerate outbursts." He looked directly at her. "Given the evidence, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of the HOA. Ms. Miller, you are hereby suspended from all community duties pending criminal review." Gasps filled the room. Karen slumped into her chair, her confidence collapsing in real time. After the session, reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones extended, and everyone wanted a statement. I only said one thing: justice doesn't need noise. It just needs proof. That line ran on every local station by nightfall. But while Karen's world fell apart, something else started to unravel. The deeper investigators dug into the HOA's records, the uglier it got. Turns out Karen wasn't working alone. 2 board members, Mark and Susan, had helped funnel money, signing fake invoices for maintenance that never happened. The trench project? It was a cover-up. A way to bury evidence, literally. When agents raided the HOA office, they found hard drives hidden inside a false wall panel. Files labeled private dues and alt accounts. There were spreadsheets tracking every homeowner who refused to pay extra, marked as non-compliant. Beside my name, there was a note: "Make an example out of him." My stomach twisted reading that. All this had been planned. Roe called me that night. "Michael, you need to know she wasn't just abusing HOA power. She was laundering money through property improvements. You exposed a full-scale fraud operation." I leaned back, speechless. "So the trench, the flooding, all of it was to scare me into silence." "Exactly. But you didn't scare. You recorded." It was strange. For the first time in months, I felt proud. Not for winning, but for surviving something that was never supposed to be winnable. Days turned into weeks. The story made national headlines. Social media erupted with hashtags like HOA Revenge and HOA Flooded by Karen. News anchors debated homeowners' rights on prime time. Strangers sent me messages of support saying, "You fought for all of us who've been bullied by these HOAs." And yet, despite everything, I couldn't shake one feeling: emptiness. My house was still damaged. My savings were nearly drained from repairs. And every time it rained, I still heard the echo of water gurgling through that cursed trench. Then one evening, a black car pulled up outside again. My heart jumped, but this time it wasn't the fake enforcers. It was Agent Rowe. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Court ruling came early," he said. Inside was a document stamped with a state seal. Property restitution granted. HOA assets to be liquidated for damages. I looked up at him. "You're serious?" He smiled. "Karen's accounts are frozen. You'll get back every cent plus penalty." I exhaled slowly. It was finally over, but then he added quietly, almost over. I frowned. What do you mean? He hesitated, then said, Karen's out on bail, and she's not happy. She's been asking around about you. A chill ran through me. She's planning something? He nodded slightly. She's unpredictable. Just keep your cameras on. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind outside felt like her shadow. I knew the kind of people who can't handle losing power. And Karen was one of them. When I finally closed my eyes, I whispered to myself, if she comes back, I'll be ready. She built her kingdom on fear, but I tore it down with evidence. ChatGPT can make mistakes. ¿Qué importa? The night was calm, too calm. After everything that had happened, silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like the pause before a storm. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights reflect off the puddles in my driveway. Rain had started again, slow but steady, each drop echoing against the cracked patio bricks the flood had once destroyed. Around midnight, my motion sensors pinged. A faint alert on my phone. Backyard movement detected. I pulled up the camera feed. The image was grainy, blurred by the rain, but I saw her. A figure in a hood, standing by the trench line. Karen. For a moment, I just froze. She was digging at something, maybe trying to unblock the water flow, maybe trying to destroy more evidence. Then she turned toward one of the cameras, her face illuminated by a flash of lightning. Even through the rain, I could see the madness in her eyes. I dialed 911. This is Michael Grant, I said steadily. The woman under criminal investigation for property damage is on my land right now. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Units are on their way. Stay inside. But I couldn't. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out. The rain hit hard, cold and relentless. Karen, I shouted. What the hell are you doing? She flinched, then spun around. Her hands were muddy, her hair plastered to her face. You think you won? She screamed. You think they'll believe you forever? I took a step closer, the beam of light shaking slightly. It's over. Go home before you make it worse. Her voice cracked. You ruined my life. No, Karen, I said quietly. You ruined your own the moment you thought power made you untouchable. For a second, she just stood there, trembling, furious, desperate. Then she turned and tried to pull up one of the wooden barriers near the trench. The soaked ground gave way beneath her. She slipped, falling knee-deep into the mud as the water surged forward. I rushed forward, grabbing her arm before she slid further. She looked up at me, gasping, her voice barely audible over the rain. Why are you helping me? Because, I said, pulling her up. I'm not like you. The sirens grew louder in the distance, blue and red lights cutting through the darkness. Officers ran toward us, shouting commands. They handcuffed her gently, reading her rights as she stood there shivering. Her once perfect reputation washed away in the very mud she created. As they led her to the car, she looked back at me one last time. They'll forget about you, she hissed. People always forget. I stared at her through the rain. Not this time. When the police cars left, the neighborhood slowly came alive again. Lights turning on, curtains pulling back. People stepped out of their houses, some approaching me quietly. Lisa, the neighbor who had once been too afraid to speak, said softly, You saved this whole street. I shook my head. No, I just proved that no one's above the law. Over the next weeks, things began to heal. The state officially dissolved the HOA, replacing it with a volunteer association under county oversight. The trench was filled, the land restored, and the lake's edge reinforced properly. My insurance, along with the restitution money, covered every dollar of damage. But it wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about principle, about standing up when someone with fake power tries to crush you. One afternoon, as I was repainting the porch, Agent Rowe stopped by one last time. Thought you'd like to know, he said. Karen pled guilty. Fraud, impersonation, property damage, and the works. She's getting 2 years, maybe more. I set down the paintbrush and nodded. Justice, he smiled faintly. You did good, Grant. Most people just let it go. You didn't. After he left, I sat on the porch and watched the lake shimmer under the setting sun. It looked peaceful again, like it had forgiven everything that happened. I thought about how close I came to losing it all. And then I thought about something my dad used to say when I was young. Land isn't just dirt, son. It's your story written in the ground. That night, I installed one last camera near the edge of the lake, not out of fear, but as a reminder. Not of Karen, not of the flood, but of what happens when you stop being afraid to fight back. A week later, a small news crew came by to film a follow-up segment. The reporter asked, "So, what would you say to people dealing with HOAs that abuse power?" I smiled slightly and looked straight into the camera. Never let someone use authority to steal your peace. They can flood your land, but not your will. The clip went viral again, but this time it wasn't for the drama. It was for the message. Months passed. Grass grew over the filled trench. The lake sparkled clean again. My house stood strong, not just a structure, but a symbol. Sometimes when the wind was calm and the water still, I'd think about Karen, how far she went to protect something fake, and how little it took to bring her down. Just the truth. And every time I looked at that lake, I remembered what it cost me to stand my ground. But I'd do it all over again, because this is my land, my story, my freedom. I didn't fight for this country to be told I can't live free on my own land.